Welcome everyone to Not That Media. My name is John and in today's video I continue my series of videos relating to Monopoly Event's upcoming convention For the Love of Horror. There are over 30 guests in attendance this year and it would be very easy to assume that everybody knows everything about everyone attending, but this isn't always the case. So what I thought I would do for the guests I'm meeting is give a couple of recommendations for each of them and tell you why I'm really excited to meet them. So this video, come along with me as I talk about Tommy Lee Wallace and Stacey Nelkin. For Stacey Nelkin, I can only really give one recommendation because the truth is I've only seen her in one film, and that is the role of Ellie Grimbridge in Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. This was the first and only attempt in the Halloween franchise to disassociate itself from Michael Myers. John Carpenter had, at the time, thought he had correctly killed off Michael Myers and Dr. Loomis, and there was no requirement or storyline to continue with them. So the plan was to turn the Halloween franchise into more of an anthology, kind of similar to what eventually would become American Horror Story, have a different story each time revolving around the theme of Halloween, and Halloween 3 was the attempt to do this. Now Halloween 3 by itself is a great film. It is one that I think is wrongfully treated by Halloween fans because, oh, it's not got Michael Myers in it, doesn't instantly make it a bad film. People are quite happy to talk about bad Halloween films with Michael Myers in it, but I always feel that Halloween 3 gets chastised purely because it's got the title Halloween 3. Trying to stay relatively spoiler free, the plot for Halloween 3 involves Tom Atkins and Stacey Nelkin's characters on somewhat of a mystery trail. Stacey's character of Ellie's father opens the movie on the run from some mysterious suited men who may or may not be they're kind of Michael Myers like in the way that they move and act, but they are men in suits. But eventually he ends up in the hospital holding a silver shamrock mask and dies. Ellie and the Doctor, played by Tom Atkins, decide they want to investigate this Silver Shamrock company to try and unravel the mystery of what was going on and why he died and why he was so terrified of this mask. In doing so, and again trying really hard to say spoiler free, they end up in the sights of a evil toy maker who has a fantastic idea using parts of Stonehenge and masks to murder all children on Halloween as part of a druidic cult sacrifice in order to cleanse the earth. So it's down to Stacey and Tom Atkins' characters to save the day. This film is a fantastic piece of sci-fi horror, and I really think it deserves more notoriety than it gets. Stacey Nelkin has a really strong role in it. She spends a good amount of screen time. It's very difficult to talk about her without giving spoilers and without ruining surprises, so I've got to be very careful what I say, but she's a really cool presence. I think from a female perspective it would be very difficult to follow in the shoes of Jamie Lee Curtis, in that obviously Jamie Lee Curtis was the star of Halloween 1 and 2, but I think Stacey Nelkin holds her own in Halloween 3 and is a compelling and interesting character who is well worth your attention. Regardless of what you may have heard of Halloween 3, I really recommend watching that film. Watch it in isolation. Do not put Michael Myers front and center. Do not expect Dr. Loomis or any of those kind of things, and I really think you'll have a good time. The second person I want to recommend on this video, and continuing the Halloween 3 and Halloween tradition, is Tommy Lee Wallace. Now, Tommy Lee Wallace is a fantastic writer-director and has had multiple hats across multiple films. He is, and I never know if this is really public knowledge, but it should be, and it is, that Tommy Lee Wallace has a fantastic claim to fame in that he designed Michael Myers' mask. He created two different masks, Michael as we know him and a clown mask, and presented them to John Carpenter and the set, and they all quite happily agreed on Michael Myers. So first and foremost, Tommy Lee Wallace deserves a medal in the Hall of Fame of Horror because he created the iconic Michael Myers mask. He also plays Michael Myers in the original 1978 Halloween. He plays Michael in the closet scene where Michael breaks through the closet to try and reach Jamie Lee Curtis. That is Tommy Lee Wallace. Once John Carpenter had surrendered his duties and interest in continuing as a writer and director of the Halloween franchise, he handed those reins over to Tommy Lee Wallace. So Tommy Lee Wallace is the writer and director of Halloween 3, and he also makes a ongoing, but you only know if you know role as the voice of the narrator of the Silver Shamrock adverts. The famous "It's almost time, kids" is Tommy Lee Wallace's voice. From what I understand, that was never supposed to be the voice, but by the time it got into the studio and got to certain stages, everyone was really happy with the way Tommy Lee Wallace delivered that line, or those lines I should say, so why not keep them in? Continuing the John Carpenter trend as well, Tommy Lee Wallace did make an appearance and was an editor on The Fog. He appears as one of the ghosts, he is completely unrecognisable, and it is a blink and miss moment, but it's really cool to know that Tommy Lee Wallace was working hand in hand with John Carpenter on a number of projects that all have been regarded as cult classics. But it's not only John Carpenter films that Tommy Lee Wallace is synonymous with. He has written and directed some really highly regarded movies. He has written Amityville 2, The Possession. He went on to write and direct Fright Night 2, which is a really good film, really good time. If you've seen the first Fright Night, it continues on, but it goes in a very different direction. It's not the same as the first one, although some of the cast return, it goes in a totally different direction, and arguably I think it's a much more I don't want to say Fright Night 1 is not a good film. Fright Night 1 is a fantastic film, but Fright Night 2 goes in a very different direction that it makes it's not as good as, but it's no worse, I would say, as well, just to make that a very complicated statement. It's a strong recommend. Fright Night 2 is what I would say. My other recommendation for Tommy Lee Wallace, and may not be a surprise to very many people, but who knows, is actually the original 2-part miniseries of Stephen King's It. Tommy Lee Wallace was the writer and director and worked very heavily on everything in it he could, and so of course we should be grateful to Tommy Lee Wallace for obviously Tim Curry's performance as Pennywise. I think obviously it's very easy to labour all the positivity on Tim Curry's performance, but the casting, the directing, the writing, it is a strong performance. Now, what I will say obviously about It is what I will say is exactly the same as It Chapter 1 and It Chapter 2 20 odd years later, in that the first part is fantastic. Tim Curry is front and centre in numerous scenes. He's really cool, the effects, the ideas are great, and unfortunately it does fizzle out a little bit in part 2. Exactly the same as the Bill Skarsgård Pennywise. So I find it very interesting that in this universe, which we have the shared cinematic universe of Stephen King, we have 2 adaptations of Stephen King's It, and both actually suffer the same problem. The first part everybody loves because the story focuses on the kids, and the second part everyone tends to walk out disappointed. So I actually like the fact that we can get 2 very different portrayals. I think both are very different and have very different pros and cons. I think what Tommy Lee Wallace extracted from the books and had on screen is exactly what you could get away with in 1990 with a TV movie of the week. Tommy Lee Wallace is an open advocate for the movie. He talks very openly and very freely about it, and one of the things I absolutely love about Tommy Lee Wallace is that he hated the spider as well, but he did try his very best. He tried to give the makeup and everyone as long as they could to create this spider. So regardless of what you may think about the film, Tommy Lee Wallace is in agreement with you that the spider sucks. And it's very rare, I think, for directors to actually be that candid. I think that Tommy Lee Wallace is a actor's director. I think he's a very humble gentleman. He has a lot of fascinating stories. He has rubbed shoulders with some greats. But when you see him in interviews and documentaries, he doesn't seem to be on a high horse in any way. So I'm really excited to meet Tommy Lee Wallace. So from a recommendation perspective, Halloween 3 for both Tommy Lee Wallace and Stacey Nelkin. Stacey Nelkin obviously is one of the stars, Tommy Lee Wallace writing and directing, and for Tommy Lee Wallace outside of that, it's got to be Fright Night Part 2, and it's got to be Stephen King's It. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. As I've said before, these are designed to be very quick whistle-stop tours. They're not designed to be deep delves and full filmographies. It's just me giving my recommendations and giving you an idea why I can't wait to meet these people. I do really recommend that you check these guys out, and if you can meet them, can afford to meet multiple people, these are the kind of people that I would recommend. So with that being said, until next time, stay scared.
It's almost time, kids. The clock is ticking.